The announcement came January 2026. Keir Starmer read the press release. £600,000 available to support Windrush compensation claimants. Virtual information sessions scheduled January 15th and 23rd. 8 years after the scandal exploded, £600,000 for thousands of victims. Across from him sat Theresa May, former Prime Minister, former Home Secretary, the woman who created the hostile environment policy in 2012, the policy that destroyed British citizens' lives. You called it what? Starmer asked. May shifted. The terminology was unfortunate. Hostile environment. Starmer's voice rose. You created an intimidating, hostile, degrading environment. That's the legal definition of harassment under Section 26 of the Equality Act 2010. You named your policy after a form of illegal discrimination. This confrontation happened January 30th, 2026, 8 years after Amber Rudd resigned in disgrace, 14 years after May launched the policy that would devastate thousands. Theresa May finally had to answer. 2012. The hostile environment begins. May became Home Secretary. May 2010. By 2012, she had a plan. Make this life impossible for illegal immigrants. Task everyone with enforcement. NHS staff, landlords, banks, employers. Everyone becomes an immigration officer. Hostile environment, she called it. The phrase appeared in policy documents, in parliamentary statements, in Home Office briefings. Create a climate so hostile that people without papers would simply leave. The problem? Many people without papers were British citizens. The Windrush generation arrived 1948 to 1973 from Caribbean countries, Commonwealth citizens, invited to Britain, needed to rebuild post-war economy. They worked in NHS, drove buses, built infrastructure, raised families, paid taxes for decades. They were British, legally, definitively, but they had no papers because they didn't need papers until Theresa May decided they did. May's 2012 policy demanded proof. Landlords couldn't rent without documentation. Employers couldn't hire without papers. NHS couldn't treat without evidence. For Windrush citizens, this was impossible. They'd arrived as children in the 1950s on parents' passports. No individual documentation. Britain was their home. They had no other country. May didn't care. The deportations began. The human cost. 23 died waiting. By 2026, the numbers were devastating. At least 23 people died. Never received compensation they were owed. Detained, deported, denied health care, lost jobs, lost homes, lost pensions. Some denied urgent medical treatment, including cancer care. They were British citizens, dying because they couldn't prove it. Starmer read from reports. Anthony Williams, deported to Jamaica 2018, died there. He lived in Britain since age 13, worked 40 years, paid taxes, raised British children. May looked down. Paulette Wilson, detained twice, threatened with deportation, lost her grandmother's house, died 2020 before receiving full compensation. No response. Sarah O'Connor, denied cancer treatment, British since 1968, worked in NHS for 30 years, told she had no right to health care. May remained silent. Hubert Howard, arrived 1960, age 5, detained 2017, deported to Jamaica, died 2020, never saw compensation. Albert Thompson, denied cancer treatment, couldn't prove residency, British since 1973. Prostate cancer went untreated. Dexter Bristol, retired welder, lived in Britain since 1968, detained, held in immigration center, threatened with deportation, lost his home, all British citizens, all destroyed by Theresa May's policy. May's defense, blame others, May published memoirs, August 2023, The Abuse of Power. She blamed Clement Attlee's 1940s government for not giving Windrush citizens papers. Starmer had read it. You blamed Attlee for a scandal under your 2012 policies. The systemic issues predated. They were British subjects, Starmer interrupted, identical status to anyone born here. They didn't need papers until you created hostile environment. May's memoir claims successive governments failed Windrush generation. Everyone's fault except hers. She regretted the terminology, not the policy, not deaths, just words, Starmer pressed. You scrapped identity cards in 2010, called it authoritarian, then created de facto ID system targeting minorities. How is that not abuse of power? No answer. Because May never understood. Her memoir proved it. She thought earlier government should have created two classes of citizens, should have anticipated internal immigration controls. She couldn't grasp the fundamental point. She created the problem, her policy, her decisions, her responsibility. April 2018. The scandal explodes. Guardian journalist Amelia Gentleman investigated. Published stories throughout 2017 and early 2018. Caribbean leaders raised the issue with May. Still Prime Minister, they demanded answers. April 16th, 2018, Home Secretary Amber Rudd apologized, said she would investigate whether people were wrongly deported. April 17th, May apologized to Caribbean leaders, promised those affected wouldn't need formal documents, empty promises. April 23rd, Rudd announced compensation, waived fees for citizenship applications. Then the letter emerged. January 2017, Rudd had written to May, described ambitious but deliverable targets for increased deportations. Rudd had told Parliament no deportation targets existed. She lied. April 29th, 2018, Rudd resigned. Sajid Javid replaced her. May survived. Barely. Starmer referenced this. Your Home Secretary resigned in disgrace. She'd lied to Parliament about deportation targets. You set those targets. You created the policy, yet you remain Prime Minister. Why didn't you resign? The institutional failures were your failures, Starmer shouted. You were Home Secretary 2010 to 2016, Prime Minister 2016 to 2019. 9 years creating and defending this policy. 9 years destroying British citizens' lives. The Wendy Williams Report. Devastating Findings. March 2020. Inspector of Constabulary. Wendy Williams published her review. 162 pages. Systematic destruction documented. Home Office showed ignorance and thoughtlessness. What happened was foreseeable and avoidable. Immigration regulations tightened with complete disregard for the Windrush generation. Officials made irrational demands. Multiple documents required. Payslips from 1970s, proof impossible to obtain. Williams laid out 30 recommendations for reform. The government promised to implement them. January 2023, Home Secretary Suella Braverman rejected 3 recommendations, including creating a migrants commissioner. June 2023, the Windrush Reform Unit was disbanded. Nothing changed. The hostile environment continued. Starmer read from Williams's report. Poor understanding of Britain's colonial history. Institutional indifference to racial discrimination. Systematic failure to consider consequences. May offered technocratic responses about departmental culture. Starmer wasn't accepting it. Williams said it was foreseeable and avoidable. You foresaw nothing. You avoided nothing. You created this disaster, then walked away. The compensation scandal. December 2018, compensation scheme announced. April 2019, applications open. By November 2021, only 5.8% of eligible people received payment. 8 years later, January 2026, most still unpaid. The scheme was designed to fail. Claimants had to apply to the Home Office, the same department that deported them, that detained them, that destroyed their lives. Many too afraid to apply. Didn't trust the government. Those who applied faced impossible demands. Same requirements as before. Documentary evidence from decades ago, pay slips, employment records, proof that didn't exist. Staff spent average 154 hours processing each case. Home Office estimated 30 hours needed. Average time to payment decision, 177 days. Average compensation awarded, £8,163. Think about that. People lost jobs, homes, healthcare, years of their lives. Detained, deported. Some died waiting. £8,163. Starmer laid this out methodically. By November 2021, only £14.3 million paid out. 81% of that paid after you changed the rules in December 2020. Because the original scheme was so hostile, victims couldn't access it. The compensation process underwent improvements. 23 people died, Starmer interrupted, died waiting for compensation for injustices your policy created. How was 8,163 pounds improvement? May had no answer because the answer was obvious. The compensation scheme was hostile, just like the environment that created the scandal. January 2026, 600,000 pounds support. January 2026, government announced 600,000 pounds fund, not compensation. Support for claimants navigating the process. Think about that carefully. 8 years after the scandal, government allocated 600,000 pounds, not to pay victims, to help victims apply for compensation they're already owed. The process was so complex, traumatic, impossible, that victim needed 600,000 pounds just to navigate it. Starmer read the announcement. 600,000 pounds to support Windrush compensation claimants. Virtual information sessions January 15th and 23rd. He looked at May. You destroyed thousands of lives. 8 years later, the government allocates 600,000 pounds, not for compensation. For help applying for compensation. You see the problem? May offered explanations about community organizations and dedicated support. Starmer cut her off. The support wouldn't be needed if the compensation scheme wasn't hostile. If it wasn't complex, if it wasn't traumatic, you're spending money to fix problems you created. The hostile environment continues. Most damning fact, the policy still exists. Renamed compliant environment in 2018. Same policy, different words. Landlords still check immigration status. Employers still verify papers. NHS still demands documentation. The system that destroyed Windrush lives remains in place. March 2022, independent report warned Home Office risked another Windrush-style scandal. Said meaningful change hadn't happened. 2024, Human Rights Watch reported compensation scheme violated victims' right to effective remedy. 2026, policy unchanged. Starmer raised this directly. The hostile environment still operates. Different name, same system, same checks. Same discrimination. You created it. Successive governments maintained it. When will it end? Immigration enforcement requires destroying British citizens, Starmer interrupted, because that's what it required under your watch. Detention, deportation, deaths. All British citizens, all preventable. The Equality Act definition. Section 26, 1, B, 2. Equality Act 2010 defines harassment as creating intimidating, hostile, degrading environment. Theresa May created hostile environment policy. Same language. Legal definition of illegal harassment. Starmer read statute. Creating intimidating, hostile, degrading environment. That's harassment. You named your policy after criminal offense. May claimed terminology was unfortunate. Unfortunate, Starmer rose. You created systematic harassment, targeted Black British citizens, denied health care, housing, employment, policy named after illegal discrimination. That's deliberate. Institutional racism exposed, Wendy Williams' report used careful language. Ignorance and thoughtlessness, others were blunt. Institutional racism. The Windrush generation was predominantly Black. Caribbean, visible minorities. They were targeted. Not white immigrants, not European nationals. Black British citizens, denied cancer treatment, deported to countries they'd left as children, detained without cause, separated from families, all while white British citizens faced no such demands. Starmer referenced the McPherson inquiry. Stephen Lawrence's murder, institutional racism in policing. McPherson exposed institutional racism in 1999. Your hostile environment recreated it in 2012. Different institution, same discrimination, nothing learned. May disputed the characterization. Starmer wasn't having it. The data proves it. Windrush citizens were Black. They were targeted. White British citizens weren't asked for payslips from the 1970s. Only Black citizens faced that. That's institutional racism. Everyone now knew January 30th, 2026. Starmer and May sat facing each other. 8 years after Amber Rudd resigned. 14 years after the hostile environment launched. 23 people dead. Thousands still unpaid, policy still operating. Starmer held the 600,000-pound announcement. May held responsibility for creating the disaster. You were Home Secretary 2010 to 2016, Starmer said. You created this policy. You defended it. You implemented it. What would you do differently? May thought carefully. The administrative implementation could have been more sensitive. Not the question, Starmer interrupted. You destroyed British citizens' lives. 23 died. Thousands lost everything. What would you do differently? Long pause. Then quietly. I believe the policy was necessary. Still, after 8 years, after 23 deaths, after thousands destroyed, she still believed it was necessary. Starmer had his answer. That's the problem. You still don't understand. You created a policy named after illegal harassment, targeted British citizens, deported, detained, denied health care to people who'd lived here 50 years, and you think it was necessary? May offered no response, because there was no response. The Windrush scandal was preventable at every stage. In 2012, when the hostile environment launched. In 2014, when deportations accelerated. In 2016, when warnings came from community organizations. In 2017, when Amelia Gentleman started investigating. Every point, May could have stopped it, could have changed the policy, could have protected British citizens. She did nothing because she believed it was necessary. And in January 2026, the policy continued, renamed but unchanged, victims still unpaid. Government allocated £600,000 for support, not justice, not compensation. Support navigating a hostile system. The hostile environment destroyed thousands of British citizens' lives. Theresa May created it, defended it, maintained it. 23 people died waiting for justice. Thousands more still waiting. The system that caused their suffering still operates. And everyone now knew that Britain's immigration policy was built on institutional racism, defended by government ministers, maintained by successive prime ministers, and the woman who created it still believed it was necessary.